All right, everybody. It's Tuesday night at 7 o'clock Central. It's time for our weekly conversations with Commodores. And I've got number 5 coming out of Stone Mountain, Georgia, Warren Norman Jr. Good evening, Warren. Thank you for making some time for us tonight.
Hey, Bernard, glad to be here.
Oh, I am too. I've been looking forward to this for quite a while. It hadn't been that long ago since you've played, and I remember following your career and watching you score some touchdowns for the black and gold. And if you would, before we jump into all those memories that may or may not be full truths, our memory fades after a while. Tell folks what you're doing down in Orlando. Catch them up on the current version of Warren Norman Jr.
Current version of Warren Norman Jr. Yeah. So, just moved here to Orlando, Florida, a little less than a year ago. Loved Nashville a whole ton, and obviously, spent all of my time growing up in the city of Nashville. So that's been really great. But really recently, just again, over the past year or so, kind of decided to kind of take on a new chapter, be somewhere, kind of set some roots, elsewhere. But yeah, like I said, been here for a little less than a year now. I'm in tech recruiting, so basically helping tech and IT companies hire and recruit staff. That's been a blessing, and just being able to kind of do that remotely and not have to be so confined from like a work schedule and a physical location has been really great. And it's been allowing me to kind of do a lot of different things, and discover some passions and some other interests. And just really enjoy kind of like this time and season of life for sure. But that's awesome. Kind of me. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, if there's any place in the country growing at close to the same rate as Nashville, it has to be your current hometown. I think that at some point they're just going to rename mid-state of Florida to, I don't know, the Orlando zone or something, because it's basically going to touch both coasts before long. When people say that they live in Orlando, is it true that you could drive an hour to an hour and a half across town and you're still in Orlando proper?
Well, I'll say this, Bernard, I wouldn't dare try to, go in my car and try to drive across town. Like we were talking a little bit about this earlier, but the highway I-4 there, it's an absolute monster in the mornings and the evenings. So I'm doing my best, being very intentional about not trying to drive. So you're probably right, but that's not something I would try to experiment or even like to think about, to be honest with you.
Well, Warren, I know that you know all about finding the right lanes. As one of the best kickoff returners in the last 30 years, I'm going to put you up there with one of my teammates, Mark Johnson, and another couple of guys that I know Dwayne will think about and share with us. When you were catching those kickoff returns, you were making me hold my breath for a minute, because I was just wanting you to hit that lane just right, and I know you were too. So that's where I want to start. To me, that's the most exciting play in football, is the kickoff return. And I got 2 questions for you. One, what was exciting for you about being a kickoff returner? And 2, what do you think about these rules that are going to eventually, in my opinion, evolve, where the kickoff return is completely gone in every level?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I love that first question, actually. I think it's twofold. First, it's super amazing, such a unique sort of time in football, because you get the whole, as a ball carrier, you get the whole entire field kind of to yourself to assess. And it's really like one of the few times too, just even as a running back, that you can actually run full speed for an extended period of time. But I just love just kind of like, catching the ball close to the goal line, and you can literally see every single inch of the field. I just love that. It reminds me of just kind of being in a backyard or in the field growing up as a kid, and we were just like throwing the ball around and just running in circles all over the place with just tons and tons of grass around. So you don't get that, opportunity a lot. And just like you said, just like finding and deciphering lanes. I mean, that's kind of at its peak on a kick return there. Just kind of to your second point, I think, it's kind of heartbreaking. I agree with you. I do think the kick return is the most exciting play in football for sure. And I'm trying to stay kind of positive about it, and maybe, we kind of get enough pushback to more or less kind of keep it in the game. But I've been a little bit nervous too about it, just kind of like, regressing and more or less kind of slowly just kind of like taking it out, or, making it a little less exciting, if you will.
Well, before we allow it to go away, I want you to take us. You're standing on the goal line. The back judge has circled his arms, indicating it's time for the kickoff. The ball's up in the air, and you got about 3.5 to 4 seconds when that ball is on its way to you. What's going on in your mind? What do you hear? What are you thinking before you're actually catching that ball?
Wow, that's a good question. So to be honest with you, Bernard, I don't know. I'm pretty just like locked in the moment. I think the most important thing, and this is for every single kick, is that you catch the ball. After that, it's really just instinct. I'm not sure if I can even just thinking back now. Everything I remember is just like me and actually running and actually just returning the kick. But like the sounds and the sights and the thoughts leading up to it, yeah, I couldn't say anything specific there. I'm just kind of locked in those moments and just ready to kind of, get going,
I'm not going to embarrass you, but what you just described is the mindset of a trained athlete. And I mean this in the utmost confidence and compliment to you. And what I'm saying is that's muscle memory. You don't have to think. You're locked in. You've done this hundreds, if not thousands of times. So you don't have to think about it. It's like being a batter at the plate. It's like, I mean, you can pick a free throw attempt. You've done it so many times, Warren, that muscle memory kicks in. You automatically drown out the crowd. You automatically focus on the end over end. Probably about the only thing is you're really looking for is where's that gunner and how close is he to me when I catch that ball. But I could talk just about kickoff returns for the next 30 minutes, but I don't want to lose everybody who's here. I want to say hey to Dwayne Jones, Jerry Lynn, Clay Sharon. I hope I pronounced it right, Jerry Lynn. I'm sorry. Is with us, guys. We're with Warren Norman Jr. and number 5 used to return kicks with the best of them in the SEC from 09 to 12 for Coach Bobby Johnson, Coach Caldwell, and Coach Franklin. What a contrast in personalities. What a contrast in men. Warren, was it your freshman year or were you still in high school when we went to the Music City Bowl downtown against Boston College? Was that your freshman year or were you still in high school?
I was still in high school then.
Did that make an impression on you? Did you get to go to the game or follow it on TV?
Yeah, was actually doing my best to get to the game. Wasn't able to make it, unfortunately, but it was very impressionable. Yeah, just kind of at the time, I was just so excited about the direction the program was going, and also just like I remember just so many guys coming back too. I was thinking about like Chris Marv had a really great year that year, Myron Lewis, and a bunch of other guys. So we had a really good core of guys coming back. So yeah, I was super excited about coming into that first year, and obviously the bowl game was such a huge deal for the community and for the school there. So yeah, it was a super impressionable time and a super exciting time too.
Well, I've had on this show, among others, Larry Smith, Chris Nixon, and many others who were in that game. And from my perspective, I'm in the stands with a whole bunch of my teammates. Obviously I'm many years older than you guys, but to get to go to a Vanderbilt bowl game, that was a big deal. To have it in Nashville, that was a big deal. What was also a big deal was how much money flew out of my wallet paying for hot chocolate because it was so very cold. I had 2 young daughters with me at the game. We had a blast, and I've never spent so much on hot chocolate, but I would have paid double to watch that game again. But I always have to ask, what are your high school senior coming out of Stone Mountain, Georgia? Obviously, you're well decorated. You're being recruited. You've got many schools that want your talents to come to their campus. But besides a game like that, and I don't know if you had made up your mind by then, but what was it that kind of pushed it over the edge, if you will? That's not a great term. What sealed the deal for you to come to Nashville as opposed to other schools that were interested in you?
Yeah, great question. So, well, I'll say this. So I'm so thankful for my parents who are just really appealing to the little bit of wisdom that I had as a 16, 17-year-old. But ultimately, Bernard, I think it was just a combination of just everything, quite honestly. Like I said, the football program was on the up and up. It was close to home, which was really important to me. Obviously, the academics was a big appeal to my parents. Not so much to me, to be honest, at the time, but it was a huge plus, And yeah, I also think too, and Des Kitchens was the guy that was the coach that was recruiting me at the time. They really sold me on an opportunity to play early, which I wasn't actually hearing a lot as I was getting recruited. So, I mean, that was, super enticing as well. But I think there was just, way too many green flags, if you will, for me not to like seriously consider Vanderbilt. And just at the end of the day, my parents were just like, really excited about that opportunity. And I think, it was just more so me just kind of like submitting to them, but not in a bad way, like, but just like really just seeing how excited they were about, going to Vandy and just, all the opportunities I would have like after school as well. And just kind of seeing their reaction to that just like really got me excited as well. But it was really a number of different things. And again, I just think my parents were a huge sort of like factor in that as well.
Sure. No, that's awesome. That's awesome. Stone Mountain, Georgia. We all know the history of Stone Mountain, Georgia, and the continuing history of Stone Mountain. I don't know about your high school, Chamblee High School, the racial makeup, but what part of, if at all, was the decision process coming out of Stone Mountain? And did you pay attention, or did it factor the racial makeup of the student body at Vanderbilt or of the roster on the football team? Did those things factor in, Warren?
Honestly, not at the time. I mean, it was definitely adjustment after the fact. And once I got on campus and started to, actually seek in and started to kind of feel that culture shock, if you will. But when I was in high school and actually considering, what that would look like, it wasn't much of a factor at all. I mean, I knew I wanted to get out of the state of Georgia just because I wanted to do something different. Sure. Or just be somewhere different. But at the same time, I still wanted to be, relatively close to home as well. So I guess in retrospect, I knew there was going to be, a different kind of thing or feel or vibe, if you will. But I guess I didn't really consider like, just kind of like the diversity and just the different sort of aspects of like people and different cultures out of like that Stone Mountain and that Metro Atlanta area. That didn't really like kind of, sink in as I was like kind of thinking about schools at the time.
Now, I'm not, and I appreciate you sharing with that, but and I'm not trying to say that you're an old dude like me, because clearly you're not. But the influence of social media was not as it is now 10, 12, 14, 13 years ago when you were coming out of high school.
Yeah.
To the extent that you were exposed to the recruiting class members who you came in with, had you met any of them? Were you able to talk or communicate before you showed up on campus for fall practice?
Yeah, as far as the Vandy guys are concerned, I met Zach Stacy at a football camp. We were in a Nike like football camp in Alabama. He was there, and I knew. Oh, and Blake Sutherland. He actually played football in Gwinnett, which wasn't too far from my high school.
Right.
There might have been a couple other Georgia guys at some point that we probably, crossed paths, whether just through games or track meets. I actually met a lot of,
Well, I was going to ask you about track in a minute, but go ahead.
Yeah, but yeah, other players from different schools at track meets. Those are only two that come off my mind, off the top of my mind at this point. But there are probably one or two more, just kind of leading up to our time actually meeting and starting school.
Now we used to compare the guys in the South. I'm from South Alabama. Whose town was smaller? Now, Stone Mountain's not that small. I mean, it is obviously compared to Atlanta, bigger cities. But Zach is from Bibb County, and other than maybe T, who's from nearby Greensboro, those are small county communities. Did you ever go visit Bibb County? Do you guys ever compare notes? Not just with Zach, but any of the guys in the class or on the team, whose town was smaller?
That was definitely a conversation within the locker room for sure. I mean, honestly, none that I took part of. I mean, I had no interest in seeing, super small towns. But yeah, no, that's a really great point you brought up, because that's something you would frequently hear, whose town was smallest, and just, some of the things that they could do that wouldn't even, be fathomable or just like controllable like in a bigger city like in Atlanta or Chattanooga, like you mentioned. But yeah, I was really never in those conversations, quite frankly, and didn't have too much of an interest to see cities like that, just to be honest.
Warren, is just a quick side note. I'll tell you, I'm an attorney in Birmingham, and I had a court hearing in Bibb County, where Zach's from, about 5 or 6 years ago. And the procedure was to call the clerk of the court to let him know you were coming. She would then beep the judge who was on his tractor at his farm, and he would still be wearing his farming clothes, throw his robe on, and we'd have the hearing. That's how small Bibb County is. But anyway, enough of that. Oh, we got a whole bunch of Commodores who've rolled in for you, Warren. We got Doug Bradley out of the Chicago area, one of my teammates. We got Darren Rothenberg, who's going to be a guest on the show coming up. Oh, we got Dante coming out of Florida. Dante Ferguson was a teammate of mine several years ago. So thank you, guys. I've got number 5, Warren Norman Jr. And we're talking about now, I want to talk about track, because I always thought that maybe track might have been your favorite sport, but you tell me. I know you played other sports, but what was it about track? What was it about the other sports that you liked?
You know, it's weird you brought that up. Track was actually my preferred sport. Yeah, like
I've done my homework. I've done my homework.
Yeah, obviously wasn't as great in track as or got as much as intention in track. But yeah, I love track. What was it about track? I don't know, to be honest with you. I just think it was just the only time in high school where I just had like fun from beginning to the end, whether it was practices, whether, we were watching a little bit of film or just kind of hanging out in rehab or training. And obviously the meets were such, an incredible time. It was just electric. And maybe that's just kind of the experience I had that was very specific to my team and to my area. I don't know, but I just loved every single second of it. And it was such a great time for me too. Just, lastly, is that there was just so much like community, like within like all the track athletes, not only at my school, but just even in the schools that we compete against. We had so much, I guess, like opportunity to just kind of mix and mingle and yeah, it just kind of formed a lot of different friendships and great friendships actually with guys from other schools, just kind of through track meets, so it was just like a really great time for sure.
I had Kevin Brothen on here last week, and Kevin was one of those rare football players, in my opinion, who loved to practice. He loved to lift weights. He loved everything it was about football. Now, Kevin played center, so that may tip you off a little bit. But for you, it's not just having the natural gifts that God gave you from an athleticism standpoint. I suspect from a track standpoint, because it's your skills and it's your what can you do on this given event versus everybody else in the field. And that there's no greater test athletically to me. But you know what I forgot? And Dante, thank you for reminding me. He coached you at Stone Mountain Middle School.
That's right, Coach Ferg, yeah.
Oh, awesome. That's a great Vanderbilt connection. Guys, I've got Warren Norman Jr. with me tonight, and we're just trudging through some sports and just some good old times. And let's see what we got. Some others. Sometimes they roll through too quickly, Warren, and I can't catch who's on with us. There's several there, but I'll try and get it. Let's talk about being recruited and playing for Coach Bobby Johnson. And I know that wasn't the whole time you were there, but Coach Johnson had some success where many coaches prior to him did not. Yeah. What did you enjoy? What did you think about Coach Johnson's coaching style and his ability to relate to his players?
Yeah, I loved it. Actually, I think it was such a contrast, coming out of high school anyway. And I think I was just so accustomed to, and this wasn't my whole entire experience in high school, but just like a bevy of coaches and more often than not, just kind of a theme was just like this high energy, very in your face, that was just kind of like the coaching style that I was just most accustomed to. And I think Coach Johnson was probably one of the first 1 or 2 coaches that did such a great job of really communicating X's and O's and encouraging, his players in a way that just wasn't like super aggressive. And at first I didn't know how to respond to it because it was just kind of unique, but just the more I just kind of like leaned into it, the more I came to appreciate it. And I think that was kind of the sentiment for a lot of guys that he coached as well.
And I've heard that from many folks, many players who played for him. Warren, let's talk about playing time. Let's talk about the roster ahead of you, whether it was in returns or in the running back room. You come out of your high school a decorated athlete, but everybody is who plays in the SEC level.
Oh yeah.
You come into that running backs room, and there's some grade A talent in that room. Who was ahead of you? Who were you trying to pattern your game? And I don't necessarily mean other players on the team, but did you have, I guess it's a two different questions. Let's go with this. Did you try to pattern your game off of anybody who's in the pros or ahead of you in college or maybe even high school that who you saw?
Yeah, it's a great question. As far as the pros are concerned, Marshall Faulk, I think we had a pretty similar stature, if I remember correctly. And I just loved how versatile he was. Like, I thought he was excellent running in between the tackles. I thought he was excellent outside of the tackles. And I was really just in awe of like kind of his, the pass game, the way he passed pro and how he just caught the ball out of the backfield. So I was always striving to be, as much as I can as a complete back. I definitely wasn't the biggest guy for sure, but I still wanted to have like a pretty comprehensive skill set. And I think Marshall Faulk was just one of those, and there was several of them obviously, but he was just one that kind of really stood out to me that I really wanted to kind of emulate in a way.
That's not a bad one right there. Gosh, he was so good.
For sure. And actually coming out of high school too, the guy who I was kind of like sitting behind for 2 years, his name was Roddy Jones. And he was just such a technician, just such a skillful, and he wasn't the biggest, strongest, fastest guy, but he was productive. I mean, rushed for 2,000 yards like every single year and just consistently just kind of showed up, did what he had to do, had such a great attitude. He definitely was a great model. As I was kind of like growing up in high school as well. He was definitely somebody I wanted to kind of like emulate too, just as I got older there.
Very cool. Very cool. Now let's transition to that first fall on campus and the running backs who were already on the roster. Who were you competing with? Who was in the room there with you?
I had a bunch of great guys that first year for sure. So Jared Hawkins was, the guy there for sure. He was a senior, not mistaken. He was a senior as I came in. And then we had Kennard Reeves, Jermaine Doster, shucks. And obviously you had, all the freshman guys, me, Wesley Tate, Zach Stacy in there, Reese Linwell, and maybe one or two other guys. We had a pretty big room actually my first year there. So it was pretty crowded, but I think Jayhawk was the guy for sure, just coming into my freshman year that fall.
Well, eventually you found your way onto the field. And I want to talk about your recruiting class or the recruiting class as a whole, the guys who you came in with. It's rare that everybody stays all 4 or 5 years and plays and graduates. In fact, I'm sure every class there's attrition for whatever reasons. Guys transfer. Lord knows it's easy to transfer now, but some guys fall out of love with the sport. Some guys just can't handle the atmosphere academically or socially at Vanderbilt. But there's always a transition during your freshman year. I was redshirted and I should have been redshirted for 2 straight years. It just took, takes guys longer. What was your transition like from a social and academic and athletic like that freshman year? Some guys take to it like a duck to water, not a problem. Other guys, like I said, they can't get over that hurdle. Where did you find yourself that first semester, that first year of your freshman, during your freshman year?
Yeah, great question. So from a football standpoint, it was pretty seamless. I mean, I came in pretty locked in coming out of high school as far as like football stuff was concerned. I was, at practice, I was in the playbook. I was, taking care of my body, as much as an 18-year-old, could or would back then. But I was just super honed in on just what I needed to do just on the field and the things that was just, kind of leading to get me on the field. And also too, like, I think we had such an amazing locker room. Really all 4 years I was there, like the guys were just so amazing. And I would argue to say like we had the tightest locker room that I've ever seen. And that was just so cool. I was friends with, like everybody was friends with everybody. And I really did appreciate that. We spent really all of our time with each other. So that was great. As far as like off the field stuff, like so in the classroom and socially, that was kind of a challenge. But Bernard, to be honest with you, I didn't realize it was like kind of problematic until maybe second semester of sophomore year. I was just so locked in with like football stuff. I wasn't as just dialed in with my school stuff, and wasn't really exploring like a lot of different like friendships or relationships outside of like the locker room as well. So yeah, it was tough, looking back. But honestly, I wasn't putting a lot of effort or energy to like kind of develop it either. I was just wanting to do football, and that was just kind of all I was focused on like the first year and a half or so.
Warren, that was your priority, and that was, you create your own priorities. No one, obviously, if you don't make your grades, you don't stay in school, means you don't play. But as long as you follow the rules of whatever the coaches have set up for the players, and you make your grades to qualify, what you do socially is obviously up on you. But you mentioned that you didn't realize it was a problem. Did it become an issue that you had to work through, or are you talking about on a bigger picture, like within the team dynamics?
No, not on the team part. Just it it kind of hit me, I guess, sophomore year that I was surrounded by just a bunch of amazing and brilliant and unique people. And I think it was just harder to kind of get into some of those circles,
Right.
a year and a half afterwards, as opposed to freshman year where everybody was just trying to meet everybody. So I
Mhm.
just kind of found myself like wanting to kind of be in different like kind of circles, but everybody kind of had like their own sort of like clicker group by the time, by the time everybody's like 2.5 years into school. So I guess I was kind of referring to that and not so much on the team level.
I see what you're saying. It's there are some, everybody's personality is different, regardless if you play sports or you're in the band or you're a great at chemistry. Not everybody can be social. Not everybody wants to be social. Lord knows I was not one of those guys who was front and center ever. And that was just the role that I played, not whether it was in the locker room or out in on campus. But I want to talk about the locker room for just a minute, because that's, to me, that's as important, if not more important, that team chemistry, than anything on the field. Because if you've got guys in the same huddle who are not speaking to each other or have grudges or whatever, who's to say the guard just doesn't let that guy slip by accidentally? I'm not saying, I'm not creating, or I have no agenda here, Warren. I'm just saying you have to have team chemistry. So my question to you is, who were the leaders when you came in your freshman and sophomore years? Who were those guys who stepped up and kept the team together, whether it was in the good times, you're winning, or the not so good times when there's, maybe a losing streak?
Yeah, great question. I mean, man, I remember my first year, I just felt like there were so many guys that was kind of like assuming like real leader kind of roles. Like I think off just at the top of my head, like Chris Marv, I know for sure, Myron Lewis for sure, Mackenzie Adams. I think he was only like 2 years older than me, but he just kind of had like this energy about him that just like really brought people into himself in a really positive way. Bradley, our center, like we had a lot of different guys that was just so great at just like bringing guys in and like getting everybody on the same page and creating like positive energy within one another. So I think there was a number of different guys my first year. And yeah, and I think that was just something like we all just kind of aspired to be, though. Just even my 4 years there, I just thought we all kind of took like some sort of initiative to bring guys, especially who are younger than us, just bringing them up, making sure we're kind of setting a good example in the locker room, in meetings, even out and about on campus as well. Like I think that was just like a really sort of contagious sort of like attribute that just kind of festered, like, from day one when I got on campus and even leading on out. Like that was just something I think everybody was super mindful of, which was so awesome to see.
Well, it speaks to the quality and the caliber of the ball players, their personalities,
Yeah.
who they were. They were, apparently the coaches were recruiting some high caliber guys who happened to be high caliber athletes at the same time.
Yeah.
Now, who could always make you laugh? Who was a jokester on the team at the time?
I mean, every single football event, practice, game, we were laughing. Bernard, it's not one guy. It's not one guy. I can tell you that. I mean, just I think about just like some guys in my class anyway. I mean, Eric Samuels is one guy. I'm thinking about Zach Stacy,
Mhm.
Eddie Foster. I mean, there's a dozen guys that was just
No,
kind of
that,
just taking that role, to be honest with you.
Warren, that speaks again to some great team chemistry. It's, every team needs a guy or two or three who keeps the team loose,
Oh,
and
yeah.
every team needs a guy or two or three who's kind of the take charge, make everybody do the right thing, and so forth. But that's all about being a teammate. It's all about being playing team sports. And guys, thanks whoever's just rolled in. I'm with Warren Norman Jr. and we're just talking about Vanderbilt in some days. Warren, I want you to take us to any good memories, that something that maybe brings you back. You might see a photo or hear of a team or a player, a teammate of yours. Take us to a game setting. Were you the kind of guy who would throw up before every game because you were so nervous? Were you the kind of guy who would take these 90-minute naps in the locker room? What was your pregame rituals, and then getting us into the during the game?
Yeah, so believe it or not, I didn't have like any sort of like customs or rituals kind of leading into a game. I was just kind of, the only thing I was mindful about was just, what I was like, what I was putting into my body, just from like a nutritional standpoint. But as far as just like, like things or habits that I had before the game, it
Mhm.
was just kind of how I felt like on, a particular day. I mean, I just remember like a lot of times, or a lot of games, I should say, a lot of games, I would want to like just be outside and just kind of like rest before, kickoff or before pregame and things like that. Some other times, I just kind of wanted to just hang out, just be in the locker room and not, really be bothered. But there was like no real pattern though, to be honest with you. And I actually even remember just like asking a few guys like who had like very sort of like structured like rituals and things they would do before a game, is just try to like, see what that was about, and just kind of like see if there's like any like real science or method to it. But I don't know, like I couldn't get, yeah, so I was gonna say like it never really made sense. It just
Yeah.
seemed like, something that was instilled into athletes, like we should just kind of like create some sort of habit before games. But
No.
I just kind of did what I feel like doing, just from game to game. And yeah, nothing really kind of came into a pattern or anything like that.
I don't think football players, I could be wrong, but I don't think football players are as superstitious as baseball players.
Yep.
Maybe that's just because I have more exposure over my lifetime with baseball. Baseball players are ridiculous. Same sock to this, it won't change this. But from a superstition standpoint, maybe a football player wants to have a certain towel hung a certain, I don't know, I'm making stuff up, but it didn't sound like that was part of your routine. What about music? Were you and are you a big music guy? Did you have to have some music to kind of get you going a little bit?
I mean, I listened to the music, but it wasn't something I needed, to be honest. Again, like, yeah, like just kind of to that point, I feel like most of the guys in the locker room had their headphones on, and most of them didn't really want to like be bothered. Like they were like just in the music and they had the headphones on and didn't want to be disturbed. They had like the look on their faces. So that's definitely sort of like a common thing for sure. But I'd say half the time I had some headphones on, half the times I didn't, and it wasn't
I hear you.
necessarily a preference either way. Yeah. So.
I hear you. All right, take us into a game or a practice that is a good memory for you. Any particular ones come to mind?
Wow. Yeah, a bunch really. I guess a memorable one is probably more recent. So I had like knee issues and things like that. Just later on throughout my career, but I remember this is my fourth year, and I'm trying to get back in the swing of things, trying to get back into rotations. Obviously, still not healthy, but just wasn't willing to kind of admit that at the point. And I had like my tonsils like or something in my mouth was starting to swell, and the doctors gave me some sort of like antibiotic or steroid to kind of decrease the swelling. I said, hey, like this will help you with your throat, take it for a week. I had like swelling in my throat. To take it for a week and you'll be fine. So I started taking this antibiotic or whatever, and I tell you the truth, like I felt like I was like 18 again. I had absolutely no sort of knee pain for the first time, like since I was in high school. I was faster, I was stronger, I was just more clear. And I had to stop taking it like after 3 or 4 days because I was sure it was like some sort of illegal substance. So I think like I went back and like kind of told like the medical staff like, hey, like this stuff, this, you know, is doing something to me like in a positive way. And it's like, yeah, it's kind of like a, I think they said something along the lines like it was like an actual steroid.
Mhm.
It's like, all right, I can't stop. Like I gotta stop taking this. My mouth still isn't like really fully healed, but I just had like a really bad feeling about it. But I was just like a recent memory. But I just remember just kind of like practicing like I was practicing when I was, you know, my freshman year when I was just like completely healthy, and it was just such a just felt like the first, you know, 2 or 3 practices that I really enjoyed, you know. So that was like that was a fun time for sure.
Wow. You know, you never know what sticks in our memory bank.
Mhm.
It's it's easy to remember the defeats, the losses, the drop passes, the fumbles, the whatever. Believe it or not, those stick with most people, I think, a lot more than the diving touchdown or the six, you know, you take it to the house. But regardless of which end of that spectrum that you're on as an athlete, you're always competing. You're always
Yep.
wanting to do your very best. But at some point, and I have to ask this because I ask it of everybody who's on the show, at some point, you know when it's time to transition out of playing football and to move on to the next stages of life. And I know that after you graduated, you moved into the professional ranks, you started working. But do you remember that time period when you knew that it was time? You know, you'd had the injuries, you had, I don't know if you still had another year left, but what take us to that time period, that transition period?
Yeah, for sure. So it was following my 4th year. So I probably had maybe 125 snaps that year, and probably was somewhere around 60 to 70% like full health. I technically had another year left, like, you know, to play if I decided to. And yeah, it was really just after that season, I knew like, hey, like it would probably be in my best interest to start like actually thinking about, you know, what it is I want to do 10, 20, 30 years from now.
Mhm.
And yeah, it was really the first time I actually gave that like some serious thought. Like even up into, you know, going into my 4th year, it was still just, you know, football or nothing, you know. But yeah, like after that fourth year of mine, started like really to decide like, all right, so what are some steps I can take to really figure it out, you know, what it is I want to do, what else I'm passionate about, and just what other skills that I have, things like that. And I'm grateful too, you know, just to be able to kind of have that extra year, to not have like so many football obligations, and just to be able to kind of discover some things, you know. Started working part-time, got involved with like a lot of different organizations and ministries around like Nashville. Just had so much space to kind of like do different things, and form new relationships and take different kinds of classes, you know. But yeah, it was definitely after that 4th year, just really started to kind of give that some thought, and just start actually taking some steps as to the next thing, if you will.
How strange was it to not be on that athlete's clock, that regimented clock? For me, my grades always went down in the spring. I had better grades each fall. And I guess it was because you're on that regiment. How was your transition to becoming, I'll call you a civilian now. You know, you're back in the real world with the
Mhm.
rest of the kids, the rest of the students. Was that a
Yeah.
strange transition or did you take to it pretty easily?
So I'll say this. So I had like the mindset of, you know, transitioning to a civilian, as you say, but I was still kind of on the regimen. I was still waking up early, working out, still kind of doing the football things. I just kind of took a step back with like the meetings and the practices, but I was
Yeah,
still.
not getting hit. How about that?
Oh yeah, not getting hit. That was definitely, you know, a blessing for sure. But no, like I still like wanted to, you know, just really tap into that I guess like that athlete sort of like clock there.
Mhm.
Because that, I don't know, like it gave me energy, and I didn't know any better too. Like I didn't want to kind of experience a life where I was just kind of like, you know, just waking up at 9 a.m. like a lot of my, you know, college, you know, peers
Mhm.
did, and just, you know, kind of roll into something. I still like kind of set like a real rigid schedule, you know. So if I, like I said, I was working part-time, I was getting involved with a lot of different other things. Like that was still like very structured and very organized. So I attacked that the same way I kind of attacked like just kind of the football stuff, just, got up early, worked out, make sure I was showing up early to everything. So I still kind of had like that mentality, even like switching over to like a different side of the world.
But I bet you weren't running the stadium steps at sunrise anymore.
No, but not the stadiums, yeah.
I bet you let that go.
Yeah, no stadiums for me, but
And
yeah.
Warren, I want to welcome one of my teammates. One of the most sure-handed receivers I ever saw. Tom Fitz has joined us. Fitzy, good to see you, bud. Got a question for you from Dwayne Jones. What was your favorite away stadium atmosphere to play in?
That's an awesome question. It was South Carolina for sure. It
And
was,
why South Carolina?
yeah, I was gonna say, so it wasn't the biggest one or really even the loudest one, but it was by far the most like electric one. Just the crowd was just so in it. They had the crowd, what I forget what year it was, but they were just playing some particular song and like they were just moving in sync with the song. And it was just like the most like kind of captivating, just sort of fan base that I saw just kind of coming into a stadium. I thought like a lot of their jeers are kind of entertaining too, you know, and honestly, not something that I really pay attention to or even notice. And quite frankly, that's like one of only maybe two schools that, you know, I can actually remember hearing, you know, stuff from the fans. But yeah, just like the stadium and the atmosphere is rather electric. And yeah, definitely just for me anyway, just my 4 years, like it definitely stood out the most in the places that I've been.
Very cool, because everybody gives a different answer.
Yeah.
They really do. My favorite was going, we played at West Point in November and it started snowing while we were during the game. And just granted, we lost late in the game, but just a gorgeous campus and atmosphere. But Warren, what about when you were away during your football years? You're still on campus, but it's off season. We'll say the spring, winter, spring. Where would you and your buddies go to hang out? Were there any places where you could just get away? I don't know if there were any favorite restaurants or spots or maybe the lake, or what did you do to get away from campus to just kind of be a regular college kid for a little while?
Wow.
Now, before you answer,
Okay.
you're still young enough. The statute of limitations on some of the things that you may say may or may not still be applicable. So no, I'm kidding with you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't really nothing too out of the ordinary. I think it was just more so just being with the guys and less of like a location or an activity. Like, so for instance, I think we did a pretty cool job of just like going different places and just like seeing different parts of Nashville. Like I even remember like going into my third year, like I was living off campus for a summer and we just saw like, you know, South Nashville and Antioch and just did like a lot of things around, you know, those areas for a while. But I think if we're just talking about just some things we did somewhat frequently, that we would go to the wave pool. Shucks, I'm forgetting where it was at now. It's been so long.
Dwayne, don't worry, Dwayne will know who it is, know what's the name of it.
Okay.
He's our memory bank, and I love that he's on with us most Tuesdays. So the wave pool, would a bunch of you guys go as a group?
Yeah, it'd probably be about like, you know, 10 or 12 of us or so. But I mean, it was
that can be a pretty intimidating group. It's not exactly like you guys are the size of the average Nashvilleian. You know, you guys all show up, and I'm just curious as to all the heads turning. It's like, whoa, here they come.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And yeah, I mean, and obviously like restaurants and things like that. We would try to switch it up there as well. As far as like some favorites are concerned, I mean, I know McDougal's was like a big one for me. I'm having a hard time remembering these places now. Like McDougal's is definitely a big one for me. Pancake Pantry for a while was like really huge. We kind of had like this thing going where we could just kind of like go through the back and just kind of like skip the line every now and then when it just wasn't.
Please do tell that secret.
Well, it's expired. It's well long expired. Which is why I'm able to kind of share now. But that was definitely something we wanted to kind of take advantage of when we could. And yeah, maybe one or two other places too that I can't think of. But yeah, like I said, I think it was more so just, you know, being together as opposed to like a particular like place or activity for sure.
You know, I've always equated the football team as the fraternity. I didn't pledge a fraternity. Most guys did not. One or two on the team each year, I think, were in fraternities. But going and doing stuff as a group, those are still good memories that you have. Now
Yeah.
here's plane flights versus bus trips. Did you have a preference?
I don't really remember any bus trips. I think
Bus
everyone.
trips? Did you play at Kentucky? Did you play at Knoxville or Memphis?
Oh,
Those are places that we took bus trips, if I remember correctly.
well, so the two times we played Kentucky, I didn't play either one of those games. So they might have bust there. But I
Mhm.
remember yeah, both times we played Kentucky away, I didn't play either one of those games my second and fourth year. Did we bust anywhere? I don't recall. I don't think I've ever like bust to a game before, to be honest with you. But now I
Man,
could be
no, you
wrong, but I
missed
don't.
that. You missed that wonderful opportunity. But and Warren, it may have been different for travel by the time you came through, but being one of the smaller guys on the team, I had the luxury of being in the middle seat
Hmm.
on flights. And that's no fun when you got linemen on either side of you. Love you
Yeah.
guys, but good grief.
Yeah.
Did you ever have to get stuck in the middle of a row between some big dudes?
Yeah, the only time I remember just being very uncomfortable, I think it was my freshman year. And you
Yeah.
know what, Bernard? I think we were on our way to West Point when we played Army.
Oh, okay.
Um,
So you had that
I-
same experience
yeah,
about
same.
getting to play at West Point.
Yeah, and it was amazing. And it didn't snow, but it was freezing cold for sure. And it was a very close game. I think we lost that one close in overtime. So yeah, pretty similar kind of thing. I forget exactly who I was sitting next to, but I think it was two linemen actually. Yeah, and it was like the only time I remember like, man, like I'm actually uncomfortable, but I'm not going to disturb these guys today. So
Yeah, and as an incoming freshman, you didn't have the what's the word I'm looking for? The pull. You didn't have the rank to
yeah,
be able to do something about it at the time.
yeah.
Guys, I've got Warren Norman Jr. We've got a few more minutes, and Warren, I appreciate your time so far. What does it mean to you now, having been a Vanderbilt man and still a Vanderbilt man in your private life, in your current professional life? Does that ever come up in conversations?
Yeah, and not as much now that I'm here in Orlando. But I'm so proud to be a Vandy alum, and I think back just like all the experiences I've had in the classroom and on the field, the relationships I've made. I often reflect on it, and when I would work out in Nashville and places like all of my athletic gear, like 99% of it anyway, has like some sort of like Vanderbilt logo on it. So I'd say maybe 2 times out of 3 times I'm working out, somebody's like, "Hey, like you went to Vanderbilt?" I'm always able to kind of have that quick conversation there, and it's been a lot of fun. Not so much here now that I'm in Orlando now, but yeah, like it's still a badge of honor for sure. Like I still have like my tassel in my car. Like even when I go home to my parents' house, there's like a lot of Vandy stuff all around.
Mhm.
It's something that I just like, I'm just super grateful for and just think on and reflect on very frequently. And yeah, I kind of wish I had some more people to kind of like talk about experiences here in Orlando with me, but it's definitely something that I'm still just very proud and just thinking about pretty often, honestly.
Awesome. Awesome. Warren, do you still follow the game now? Do you follow the team or college football as a whole? Is that still on your radar?
Yeah, so I mean, I just kind of follow, from a periphery there. I think I've probably watched the Ole Miss and the last 2 games of last year, Ole Miss and UT. But for the rest of the season, I'm just kind of like, following just highlights as they kind of happen and just like watching like post game stuff on ESPN and things like that. Yeah, and just really over the past like 3 or 4 years, like college football, quite honestly, just kind of been a little less, on my radar just as a whole, to be honest.
All right, let's play this game. You're a senior in high school. You're coming out. You're Warren Norman, but now you're an 18-year-old. You're
Okay.
being recruited. What kind of things are you looking for a school? What's important to you? We'll call you, not that you're old, please forgive me, but the modern athlete, the current high school senior and junior. I realize we've got the NIL out there and all of that. I have a question for that too. But what does the modern athlete, in your opinion, what is he or she looking for in a school? Has that changed since you were coming up through the ranks?
Yeah, so for that first part of the question, so I know just because I've actually thought about this with actual old high school teammate of mine, just kind of talking about this the other day. I know for me, like if I had to kind of make that decision over again, I think something that would be at the top of my list with that I didn't consider coming out of high school was the actual city that I would be in, like the actual location.
Mhm.
And man, was just so fortunate to be in a place like Nashville. Like it's by far like the best, city in the SEC, like hands down, and had such an amazing experience kind of seeing, exploring Nashville, and it's just absolutely loved it. And it's not something I super or put a lot of thought into just coming out of high school. As far as just what kids are looking for now, as opposed to back when I was coming up, I don't think it's much different. I think a lot of guys want an opportunity to play early and win and just get attention and an opportunity to kind of play at the next level.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, I could be wrong, but that's just kind of the sense that I get, especially just kind of considering, you're still seeing for the most part, the schools that were getting all the best recruits 10 years ago are more or less, look exactly the same. So I think that just kind of speaks to that as far as what guys are looking for, in my opinion there.
Do you have an opinion about the current version of the transfer portal? Do you think it's good? Do you think it hurts college football? Do you have any opinions on it?
Yeah, I've had a lot of like mixed feelings and opinions on it over like the past year or so. So before it was super easy to kind of like transfer and switch schools. I always thought it was just kind of I don't know, like I just thought like there was a lot of pressure on high school guys making a decision where they want to spend the next 4 years, and I never thought there's like a lot of education behind that decision other than, okay, how soon are you going to play, who's your coach, like a very just kind of finite amount of factors.
Mhm.
So I always thought like there should be like at least some sort of avenue to kind of explore transfer options like after a year. This is kind of like the mindset I had for a while. Now I kind of like lean towards it's being abused a little bit. Like I think and I can't speak for a lot of these guys. I don't know like the details and the ins and outs of things, but
Sure.
I just kind of get the impression that a lot of the guys who are or a lot of the guys that we're seeing transferring, they're just like kind of not like in their playing situation and they're moving schools or changing schools. And I think your college experience is so much more than just how much you're playing. Because again, like
Yeah.
these 4 years are going to impact like your social relationships, your job opportunities, where you're going to live. It has such a great, like such of a, so much more of an impact on your life in totality than just, what you're going to do on the field. And I don't think that's being like considered a lot when you see a lot of these guys transfer and make these kinds of decisions, in my
Well,
opinion.
when you're 18, it's hard to look at what a 38-year-old version of you is going to look like,
Yeah.
or a 58-year. You want to know what the 19-year-old version of you is going to look like.
Yep.
All right, two more questions. I'm going to cut you free. Let's go back to the fall of 2009, and let's assume that NIL deals are a thing for you as a freshman. Put yourself back there. What would be one of your two couple of choices? What would you have liked to have gotten NIL deals coming into Vanderbilt in Nashville in 2009?
Yeah. I mean, I definitely would have said yes to anything that was going to give me a little extra money in the pocket for sure. And not that, I was, like hurting or anything like that, but I just remember like so often, like I was just wishing like, man, like I just wish I had some extra money to do this or do that or do whatever. So I'm sure that's something I would have definitely probably would have tried to take advantage of had I had the opportunity to do so for sure.
Now, was the Cooker still the restaurant right on campus, or was it maybe called, was it J. Alexander's? It's probably changed names a few times.
Yeah, Jay Alexander's.
Okay. What if you'd have gotten the NIL deal to eat all you could eat there? How often would you be
Yes, sir.
at J.
Yeah, I mean,
Alexander's?
every opportunity that I got, that's for sure. I mean, yeah, that's one thing about it. Like I love to eat. Our team, like my teammates love to eat. So yeah, any food sponsors, food NIL deals, yes, I imagine would definitely say yes to all that.
But the current version of the NIL, it's the Wild West. It's crazy numbers. It's ridiculous when you see college players with, I don't know, not Lamborghinis or whatever. It makes no
Yeah.
sense. But here's what does make sense, Warren. You have to promise me here today on the show that we will never see a photo of you on social media wearing a pair of jorts while you're in Orlando, Florida.
I can absolutely promise you, you'll never see me in jorts in Orlando or elsewhere for that matter.
Well, if we ever do, we know that something is that is your cry for help.
Oh, yes.
But we know, but Warren, but I want to thank you for spending some time. I really enjoyed getting to know you a little bit and having a fun conversation tonight. So thank you, bud. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and thanks to you, Bernard. I appreciated the time. And yeah, this was a lot of fun. Absolutely loved it.
Very good. Well, guys, this is why we do this show each Tuesday night. Number 5 was a treat on the field. He was a treat tonight and just an awesome dude. Enjoyed our conversation. Y'all keep coming back Tuesday nights. As I've told you, I've got a Commodore lined up, not next week. Sorry, I kind of fibbed. No show next week, but almost every week between now and Hawaii kickoff, end of August. Y'all anchor down.